What's up, guys? Welcome back to another Commander deck tech. This one is a partner Commander deck, the DRAGONSPEAKER, and the last of the ABZAN partner commanders. It's pretty much +1/+1 counters. Like always, I am not going to go over the lands in the deck, and I will put the link to the deck list on the top of the description box so you guys can go check it out exactly how it is. If you guys want to order the cards, there's an option to just order it. And this is not the most optimized, but this is the way we play it in the play group that I play in. It keeps up with the play group. So getting right into this, the two partner commanders. The first one here, whenever an opponent casts a spell, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And the other one, it enters the battlefield with 3 +1/+1 counters, and whenever a creature you control dies or is put into the command zone, if it had one or more +1/+1 counters on it, you may put that many +1/+1 counters on a target creature. So technically, the way the deck works, you want to get him out as early as you can, and just start piling creatures with +1/+1 counters. Build it up onto this and start swinging for that 21 commander damage as soon as you can get it. But let's get into the actual deck itself. Kicking it off here, we got Llanowar Elves, Incubation Druid, Fertilid. Fertilid gets them +1/+1 counter, so if it dies before you get to use its effect and you have your commander out, you can do your thing. Obviously, Llanowar Elves and Incubation Druid. Incubation Druid has the adaptability, so it can get +1/+1 counters, and it helps with your mana fixing. And Llanowar Elves is Llanowar Elves. We got one Sylvan Ranger. We got a Joiner Adept, because you're running 4 colors. So this helps with getting your lands to tap for all 4 of your colors. This way, if you only end up with 4 land, well, if you don't have all your lands and you get this out turn 2, then you have all your colors for different plays. Evolution Sage, whenever it enters Proliferate, you're doing +1/+1 counters. So proliferating is great in this deck. 1 Kiori's Follower, obviously they're all single. Untap another target permanent. Never a bad thing. You attack with your commander when it's all built up and swing. Scourging Bandar, Malevolent Noble, and Dustshell Crawler. All creatures that enter with +1/+1 counters, or you sacrifice another creature or artifact and put a +1/+1 counter. So Malevolent Noble with your commander is really, really good, because if you get your commander out, you get Malevolent Noble out, you pay 2, you sack one of your other creatures with the +1/+1 counters on it, and you start pumping it up onto the Noble, onto your other commander, onto whatever your biggest creature is, whatever you gotta do. Skyclave Shadowcat. Another way to sacrifice your creatures with +1/+1 counters on them. Puts a +1/+1 counter on Shadowcat, and if your commander's out, you get to put the counter somewhere else. And then when a creature with +1/+1 counters on it dies, draw a card. So it adds some draw power to the deck. Baloth Pup. As long as it has a +1/+1 counter on it, it gets trample. So this thing can get pretty big. We have this guy here, the Seed Sculptor. Enters with a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, so it helps get some counters out there. Arcbound Stinger. Shapers of Nature, so you can turn your +1/+1 counters into draw, and you can put some more +1/+1 counters out there. Duskhaunter Bat. Bloodthirst, if an opponent was dealt damage by this card this turn, when this enters the battlefield, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on it. And it is a 1/1 flyer, so if you put some counters on it, get them flyers in there. Selvala Enforcer. When it enters the battlefield, each player reveals the top card of his or her library. For each non-land permanent card revealed this way, put a +1/+1 counter on Selvala's Enforcer and draw a card. Well, each player draws a card. So this isn't as good as I'd like it to be. I think more times when I played this, it's hit a couple of lands on everybody's deck. I mean, which is fine. You really don't want your opponents to draw into like removal or combo pieces or something when you drop this, but you also don't want to always see all lands either, because you want to get some counters on it. We got Constrictor. The Hagra Constrictor enters with 2+1/+1 counters. Each creature you control with +1/+1 counters gives Menace. So it makes your creatures harder to block because they will all have Menace. Shout out to Yu-Gi-Oh! Matt here. We got Spiteful Squad, Steelbane Hydra. Remove a counter from Steelbane Hydra for 3 and destroy target artifact or enchantment. So it's got removal on a stick. And when the Spiteful Squad dies, you can put the +1/+1 counters on target creature. Daggertooth, when it is dealt damage, you proliferate. Zagana, Utopian Speaker, enters. If you control another creature with a +1/+1 counter, draw a card, has a DAT 4, and each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter gets trample. So depending on how big you get your creatures, you can give them trample, menace, and just start swinging out. And what are they gonna do? Barkhide Troll, Miss Meadow Witch. This one is another card that I don't know that I like necessarily, but does help deal with problems sometimes. You just pay for and exile the target creature and return to the battlefield under its opponent's control at the end step. So depending on how much mana you have, you can deal with a lot of problems with your opponent's stuff. Fine Broker, because your creatures need to die generally. So you need stuff to get stuff back from the graveyard, and Fine Broker does that for 4. Ivory Tusk Fortress. This card, untap each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter during each other player's untap step. So it makes your stuff just untap every turn, because almost every single creature you play is going to have a +1/+1 counter on it, one way or another. So you're going to untap everything on everyone else's untap step. And it's an elephant. Like, who doesn't want to play elephants? Hamza. This spell costs 1 less for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter, and creatures you cast cost 1 less for each creature you control with +1/+1 counter. So it makes all your stuff cheaper. Stronghold Confessor. It has Kicker, it's Menace, and if it was kicked, it enters with 2 +1/+1 counters. So, I mean, late game, you can kick it. Early game, it gives you a 1/1 to start putting counters on or blocking with. Woodland Wanderer, Vigilance, Trample. When it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter for each color mana spent to cast it, you are running 4 colors, so it can enter with up to 4 colors of, or 4 +1/+1 counters on it. Verdant Automaton, pay 4, put a +1/+1 counter. Pelt Collector, because a lot of your stuff is going to be bigger than Pelt Collector. So that, and then you can make Pelt Collector bigger, and as Pelt Collector, if it has 3 or more +1/+1 counters, it gets trampled. So it gets pretty big pretty fast. Gnarly Colony. This card is okay, I guess. When it's kicked, it enters with 2 +1/+1 counters. And each creature with +1/+1 counters you control get trampled. So another way to get trample. One of my favorite ways to win the game is with trample damage. So Timeless Witness. Graveyard Recursion. You don't really have... Like, you want your creatures to die, so you want to get them back. And it has Eternalize 5. Or it has Eternalize for 7. Sorry, can't count today. Carrion Feeder. Sacrifice a creature, put a +1/+1 counter. Another way to destroy your stuff with +1/+1 counters to move the counters around. Vastwood Hydra. Hydras are great in this type of deck because everything's going to have +1/+1 counters. And when it dies, you distribute a number of +1/+1 counters equal to the number that were on it. Charging Badger. A 1/1 for 1 with Trample. Great thing to put +1/+1 counters on it. Biomancer Familiar. Makes your effects, activated abilities, 2 less to activate. And it can't reduce the effect of a mana. Can't affect oh my god, I can't today. This effect can't reduce the amount of mana and ability cost to activate less than 1 mana. So just getting a 2 cheaper is good. Grun, the Lonely King. I actually have a buddy in my playgroup who has a Grun, the Lonely King deck. So I'm going to try and get that profile from him or a deck tech from him. Maybe we'll show you guys his build. We got the Lurcher. Gets a +1/+1 counter equal to the number of creatures in your graveyard. You're running a lot of creatures, so this is going to enter with something. Pollen Bright Druid. Put a +1/+1 counter or proliferate. Master Biomancer. Each other creature you control enters with a additional +1/+1 counter on it equal to Master Biomancer's power and as a mutant in addition to other types. So more ways to get +1/+1 counters. Benthic Biomancer has Adapt. When you put one or more +1/+1 counters, you can draw a card and discard a card. Great. Skitter Eel. Another Adapt creature to get some counters. Sharkdo Crab. Whenever one or more creature +1/+1 counters put on Sharkdo Crab, tap target creature an opponent controls, and it doesn't untap during its untap step. So there's ways to win with Sharkdo Crab. You put enough counters on it, and then just tap everything down. Endless One. Probably the best card in this whole deck. Late game, gets a bunch of +1/+1 counters on it. Just gets big. If you can get it where it has Trample and Menace, it just becomes a big problem for everybody. But that is all the creatures in this deck. We're running one Planeswalker, Gideon the Oathsworn. When you attack with 2 or more non-Gideon creatures, put a +1/+1 counter on each of those creatures. So it gets more +1/+1 counters out there. And then you can make him a 5/5. It's still a Planeswalker and prevent all damage that would be dealt to Gideon that turn. And then -9, exile Gideon and each creature your opponent controls. So just a 1 Planeswalker. For artifacts, we're running your basic stuff. Soul Ring, Swiftfoot Boots. I'm running a Prismatic Prism because I like the draw off of it. Weapon Rack to put more +1/+1 counters. Bow of Nylea because attacking creatures you control have Death Touch. So what better thing when you're already giving them Trample, Menace? Let's give them Death Touch. Why not? And I guess technically the Bow of Nylea is an enchantment and an artifact. So that is the artifacts for the deck and one of the enchantments. The other enchantments you're running is Frogify. Make your opponent's stuff smaller. And Finest Hour. Exalted. When a creature you control attacks alone, that creature gets +1/+1 until the end of the turn. And when a creature you control attacks alone, if it's the first combat phase, untap that creature and there's an additional combat phase. So it lets you attack again, which is great. So those are your enchantments for the deck. For your instance, we're running a Stony Strength. Put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. Eldamri's Call. Search your library for a creature. Essence Capture. Counter target creature spell. Put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. Reap What Is Sown. Put a +1/+1 counter on up to 3 target creatures. Wild Onslaught. Put a +1/+1 counter, and if you kick it, you put 2 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. So ideally, you want to kick this so you can get 2 +1/+1 counters on everything. That is your instance for the deck. Sorceries. Spoils of War. Put X +1/+1 counters on a number of creatures divided the way you choose. Shimmer Possibility. Scale the Heights. Biogenetic Upgrade. Adventurous Impulse. And Environmental Sciences. Now, I want to get a Cultivate for this deck, but I don't know how much longer I'm going to keep this deck around. But for right now, guys, that is the deck tech. Like I said, the list will be in a link at the top of the description box for you guys to go check out. So if you have any questions, leave a comment down below. I will try to answer all the questions as we get them. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in the next deck tech.